Brigid Shea. Commissioner Shea is well known for her environmental efforts to reverse climate change and better prepare people for climate disasters. She won 3 national awards for climate resilience programs, led efforts to prepare a climate action plan, to declare a climate emergency, and to create innovative programs to better prepare communities for wildfires, floods, and other climate-related disasters. She championed water conservation measures to convert existing and future county buildings away from using treated drink water for air conditioning and replacing it with treated wastewater, also known as purple pipe water. Cathy McHorse, with over decades of experience in early childhood education and community advocacy, Cathy currently serves as an early childhood consultant, specializing in fostering strategic collaborations to improve outcomes for young learners. She spearheaded initiatives securing millions in funding for childcare relief and early childhood systems recovery. Leveraging her expertise, she continues to champion early childhood causes through leadership roles on various state and local boards, striving to create lasting impacts on early childhood policies and programs. Please help me welcome Commissioner Shea and Cathy McHorse. And thank you very much.
Can y'all hear me okay? Can people in the back hear me all right? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Joanne and League of Women Voters. I'm delighted to be here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Proposition A for affordable child care from my perspective, both as a county commissioner, but also as someone who had a terrible time finding child care when my kids were young. And I actually want to start there. How many of you either experienced that yourselves or knew or know people who are struggling to either find child care or afford child care? Can I just see a show of hands? Keep the hands up high, because I want everybody to look around and see. This is not an isolated issue or problem in the community. And COVID made things much worse because so many child care operators closed and have not reopened. I think it's something like 20% or more that we lost during COVID, and there was a shortage before that. So it's hard to find good quality child care, and it's incredibly expensive. It is literally, in many cases, more than the cost of tuition at UT. Think about that. It costs more to get quality child care than it does to pay for college tuition at UT. So we know that an enormous number of families are struggling, and that's really the context for this initiative. And I have to give enormous credit to Cathy McHorse, who has been working in this field for years and making the case to elected officials about the importance of investing in child care. And really her work and the work of Councilmember Allison Alter and the work of Libby Doggett and a number of other people really created this effort. They got grant funding, and I'll let her talk about it in more detail, but they were able to bring in people with real expertise and draw on foundations to help think through what would be a good mechanism for really addressing this issue of not enough quality child care and too expensive. So that's really what Proposition A is. It is a voter item asking the voters to approve funding for quality child care, and it focuses on the very youngest of birth to 3. That's the major focus area, because the state does fund pre-K, and that's also contributed to the problem, the crisis with child care. The state funding for it ended up having the adverse effect of depriving the child care operators of paying families to help offset the higher cost of care for the very young, because you have a much lower ratio of students to teachers for infants. You want more eyes on your babies. You don't want to have, giant numbers of them and just one person. So that was the other context that created this crisis. So that's what Proposition A is under Travis County. It is a request to vote to fund quality childcare for children who are in the most formative stage in their development. Children's brains, when they're born, are giant sponges, literally soaking up everything and are learning everything about their world. I mean, somebody said, if you think about it, you probably know what a carpet tastes like because as a baby, you catalog the physical world with your tongue. And it's just it's a reality I think we all recognize that babies are just, an incredible stage of learning when they are first born, and that focus age from 0 to 3 is what this child care initiative focuses on primarily, and it also provides funding for after-school care, and these are targeted to people of lower income. And it's the people who struggle the most to try and find that child care. And when people say to me, well, isn't this a really big expense? My answer is, most people don't know this, but over half the county budget currently is for justice-related initiatives. Every county in Texas is required by state law to have a jail. It's the least, favorite thing that we do, but we're required by law to do it. We have the courts, we've got the sheriff and the law enforcement and the corrections officers and the probation programs and the pretrial programs. So huge array of programs that are all part of the justice system. Well, what if we used some of that investment and instead invested in the most impactful training with quality childcare, because part of this will also help improve the quality training for the childcare workers. What if we did that paradigm shift and said, we're going to invest instead on the front end to make sure that all these children who have trouble accessing quality childcare now, their families do, get some of the best childcare they can get. We know, and Cathy's got so much data on this, it's really profound, but we know that if very young children have access to high quality child care, it reduces incarceration rates. I mean, that makes sense. If you're investing in high quality education for infants up to 3 years, you give them a better chance in life. You give them the kind of head start that I think all believe that children should have. So that's part of this paradigm shift, is we're asking the voters to support this so that we can make this investment and really alter the fate, alter the lifetime trajectory of these children. The data also shows higher graduation rates, better health outcomes. And these are the kinds of things where we are having to spend a lot of money at government levels to try and make up for what young children didn't get at the beginning of their lives. So to me, this is an absolutely transformational investment. And I do believe that when this passes, because I think it will, historians are going to look back at this time and mark how profoundly it altered the fate of so many children. So that's why I'm a huge advocate of it. I did have questions at the beginning about how's the county going to manage this, because we are really a lean operation. We do not have the staff or the budget that the city has, but we ultimately decided that the county is the right place to initiate it, if you will, because we can serve more people. And a lot of people who are struggling to make ends meet move out of the city into the farther areas of the county. So we know we have a great need out there, and this will allow us to serve everyone in the county, whereas if the city did it, they'd only be able to serve people within the city limits. So that's just some context for why we are doing this. We are asking the voters, it is required by state law. They have dramatically ratcheted down the ability of local governments to fund services. All local governments used to have a cap of 8% for revenue. It's now 3.5%, and the legislature's talking about lowering it even more. And it's really a war on local government and on government services for people who need it. So that's some of the context for it. I'm going to let Cathy give you more detail about all the other aspects of it, but I think it's important for people to understand we can either invest in jails or we can invest in giving people a better start in life and alter their trajectory. And I want to invest in giving people a better start in life. So that's my story. Thank you. Well, 10 each. Okay, yeah.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. She's been such a
Might need to speak louder.
Can you hear me? No?
If you hold it, that'll work.
I used to teach early childhood, so if y'all just sat in a circle, we'd have a really great time. But thanks for letting me join you today and share more. I want to start with some context of childcare funding. Early childhood funding is inversely proportional to the impact it has on young children, and it is the least invested in educational period of any time. So we invest less in early childhood than elementary, than high school, than college. But as Brigid said, the impact, the most critical period of brain development is those first 3 years, and that's why I've worked in this field for so long. The federal government invests in our states by granting child care funds to states for parents who are low income, working, and or in school. We get sufficient funds from the federal government and the state of Texas to cover about 10% of those children. Texas, unlike many other states, adds $0. They meet a required match, but they do not supplement that funding in any way. We know public education is underfunded. Early childhood education is not funded. And we can't wait because we are having a crisis around this in Travis County. It started with COVID. There were local investments, and we started the research into this progress when we received COVID relief dollars from the city and county, because smart people on our city council and county commissioners said, what happens when this is over? And we're seeing the impact of that. Our waiting list for child care subsidies, the state subsidies in Travis County, has 5,400 children on the waiting list. That's a 2-year wait for families who are working or in school, workforce development programs at ACC. They go on the website and say, I'm going to sign up now, and you can't sign up till you have a baby. 2 years. We only get sufficient funding in Travis County to fund 3,000 children, and there are 24,000 low-income children under age 6 in our community. Meanwhile, costs are rising for our child care providers. They're facing the same costs as any other small business because 70% of them are small businesses, mostly run by women, and a majority women of color. They are entrepreneurs in our community. They get that very limited state funding that does not cover the costs of running a high-quality child care center or what they can charge families. Well, they're not charging families what it costs to provide care. They're charging what they think families can pay, because that's the tension. You have either a limited public fund or you pass the costs on to families. Their rents are going up, their utilities, they feed children, etc. So the only way they stay alive is then, or stay salient, is to compress the wages of the workforce. So the average wage of our child care workforce is $14.58 in Travis County. That's not a living wage, and mostly they do not receive any kind of benefits.
You can make more at the Dairy Queen.
You can make more at Dairy Queen for sure. And as they're not able to live in Austin, they're not coming to Austin to work in childcare. So right now, some of our challenges, we have empty classrooms because we can't hire teachers, and there are parents who need care. Our supply is way down and the demand is up. And I didn't do great in economics, but I know that raises costs on families. Childcare costs for families in our community are either equal to or right behind their housing costs. And this is a challenge. So what will this do? And I want to get a little bit into, Commissioner Shea mentioned, we've been working at this a long time. We've nibbled around the edges on policies and grants in our community to address high-quality childcare. A coalition has been in place since 2012, helped launch Pre-K3, and AISD has done a lot of work. But we kind of nibbled around the edges, tried to reduce costs here, grant there. And so when we were asked what happens when COVID relief funds expire, we connected with the Children's Funding Project, who have worked in 48 different municipalities to pass local ballot initiatives to support children and youth funds. And they worked hand in hand along the way. They've actually matched our funding to help us really come up with a strategic investment that was data-driven, equity-based, and informed by our community. So what this will do is it will increase access for nearly 10,000 children in low-income households annually. That includes expanded hours into early morning, evening, weekend with a focus on high-need areas. We also had a study by the Urban Institute that showed Travis County has essentially zero care outside of traditional business hours. Well, think about those key industries for our community, our first responders, our people who work in our healthcare community, our restaurant, hospitality employees. They cannot find childcare, and we do have a survey from the Texas Restaurant Association that showed us that. We also have 25% of our students at ACC who are parents. They cannot find childcare. That means 50% of them said they might not be able to finish this semester. They might not be able to complete their degree. But we know if students at ACC have access to childcare when they need it, where they need it, they're 3 times faster in completing their degrees. So an investment will be the largest piece of the puzzle will double the capacity for infants and toddlers and 3-year-olds in our community who rely on childcare assistance. We'll go from 2,000 to 4,000 kids. Of those 5,000 kids on our waiting list, 41% are infants and toddlers. And just to note, that waiting list of 5,400 has grown 43% since January. We don't anticipate much solution from the legislature, which means if we don't do something, that could be 10,000 kids in the next year. So again, we'll fund about 2,000 new seats to double the capacity for infants and toddlers and 3-year-olds. We will expand access in those non-traditional hours. We will also create 4,000 new seats in after-school and summer programs from pre-K up through 12th grade. So that includes youth development programs, having high school kids busy in workforce training programs over the summer. We will also invest in the workforce. The investments that are going back into the community will cover the provider's cost of quality so that they can pay their workforce a living wage. They will be able to increase the wages. We're also going to be doing some business support, coaching for these childcare providers so they can have access to technology, childcare management software, and run a more effective, efficient business that will also help us increase capacity. And the last thing that this will invest in is an employer incentive that will help us encourage more employers in our community to contribute to child care support as an employee benefit. Very few in our community do, but this will target those families who earn just too much to receive a child care subsidy and support the employer. The county funds will match the employer contribution so that our providers are earning what it actually costs to provide care in our community, pay their staff a living wage, stop the 30 to 40% turnover there, but that doesn't have to all be carried on the backs of our families who can't afford to do this at that point in their lives when they have young children. I did want to mention that this is a property tax rate election, but for context, it will yield $75 million annually, but it will be about $10.22 per month for the average homeowner, $125 a year. We expect this to add $308 million to our economy annually because of the ripple effects of investing in childcare, parents being able to more fully participate or begin to participate in the workforce, complete their degrees at ACC or their workforce development training programs. And we've done some pretty robust economic modeling on this. We anticipate over 12 years, just as looking long term, it would serve about 45,000 families in our community. And I did want to note that in the budget, for planning purposes, we built in some things. We built in a required third-party evaluation to make sure that we're hitting the impacts that were intended. And we also built in a community advisory council or board that will be involved in the process. I think
Okay. Chambers.
Oh, yeah.
Hope you did it in 9 minutes. I just want to add another note to kind of underscore some of the things Cathy said. 6 of our business chambers, I think that's almost all of them, have come out in support of this. And initially, someone in workforce said, this was several months ago, they were having a conversation with a business person with one of the chambers, and the business person said, why should we support this? And her question back was, do you know of any businesses that have had trouble filling jobs because people either couldn't get childcare or couldn't afford it? And the business person said, I hadn't thought about that. So there is a direct relationship to developing our workforce and being able to fill positions that businesses, they go wanting now. Because people can't afford the child care or can't get it if they are working non-traditional hours. So this really is a significant economic investment for our region as well. I've heard the number for every dollar spent on this, the $13 will go back in the local economy. And I'm assuming that came from some of the economic research that you all did. So that's an enormous multiplier effect in addition to the lives it will alter.
I think I just want to add one thing to that, is that when we look at school readiness and whether kids were in a high quality program, about half of our kids in Travis County are ready for kindergarten when they enter school. And we know that if they're in a high quality environment, they're more likely to be ready in kindergarten, but there's actually data from E3 Alliance that tracks pretty much exactly whether they're kindergarten ready, tracks whether they will be reading on grade level in 3rd grade. And so if we don't invest, we're going to have to pay even more and more in our public schools for retention, remediation, intervention. And so this is a long-term investment for that educational trajectory as well.
So Joanne, is this question and answer time? Okay.
So we will open it up for questions, and while you think about your questions, I've got one to start it off with while we're setting up the handheld mics. And the question that I have is, I can remember that Donna Howard was quite prominent in addressing the shortage of nurses in our pipeline and worked with Austin Community College to develop a program so that we can have more nurses. So my question is will this help spearhead a way of increasing the workforce through a licensing program at ACC or something like that?
That's a great question. ACC does hold the child development program. It is far under enrolled because right now there is no incentive to increase your educational your certifications because there's not enough funding coming into the centers to compensate people for earning a credential. So part of the investment will, one, raise wages, which makes it more a job that people might go into, but there is also a small...
That's not you.
There's an investment in a version of a program much like an apprenticeship so that people can actually get on-the-job training and earn their first course credits at ACC before they are in a classroom alone with children.
And I can tell you on the nursing program, we we have funded additional childcare slots at ACC because the people who were enrolled in the nursing program couldn't stay in the program because they couldn't afford childcare. So there's a direct benefit on so many levels when people have access to high quality, affordable childcare and then can finish their education and contribute to our community.
Thank you, Carol Olwyn. The 2.5-cent increase in tax rate, this is probably for Commissioner Shea, will that go to a unique strategy within the county budget, or does it go to the general fund?
No, it will go to a very specific sort of walled off fund that can only be used for this program. It's part of a mechanism of that we're setting in place, but I think state law requires it as well. So it will not go into the general fund to be used for any expenses. It will be set aside specifically for this program.
I work in education, and I did not know about this proposition, and I am so fully in favor of it, and I see every day when I'm in schools exactly what you're saying. And so I'm wondering how we can help support and what we can do to get the word out, because if I don't know about it, I'm guessing a lot of other people don't also.
Yes, I have some literature that I was so anxious about speaking. It's still in my bag, so I will pass that out. We also have yard signs by the door that you're welcome to take, and I can give you, there is a PAC website set up. We are block walking, we are phone banking, we are out trying to raise awareness in the community because there are many Prop A's on the ballot. And we know this one seems to be a little bit under the radar, and we're actively trying to educate voters with a campaign right now. So
you can help by telling your friends and neighbors about it. You can take extra literature, and if you want more of the flyers to give to people about it, I know they have supplies available at the coordinated campaign on 53rd Street. It's a Democratic Party coordinated campaign, but I know they've got lots of flyers available. So if you need more than what you're able to get here today, you can pick them up there.
Okay. I think Cathy may have inadvertently answered this question.
Joyce, we
already.
can't hear you. Can you speak up?
I think you may have started the answer to this question. Is there material online that we can point people to? And if you know the URL, can you tell it to us?
Yes, it's www.affordableChildCareToday.com. www.affordableChildCareToday.com.
And can we ask Joanne to send that out to the participants today? Are you able to send out information and links? Thank you.
I wondered at what income level a family would qualify for these funds.
Yes, we've mirrored.
Close, yeah, keep it close.
We've mirrored the income level for the state subsidy system to make it clear for all. We don't want to confuse families that there's different eligibility requirements because there already is that for pre-K and childcare subsidy. So it's 85% of the state median income.
And that's the level for the workforce?
It's based on family income and number of children.
Yep.
So I want to say it's about $75,000 for a family of 4, but I can double check that online.
How do we answer the criticism that this will just raise taxes for people who are already in poverty and it's not worth it?
Well, the answer that I give to that is we are spending literally more than half of the entire county budget because, I mean, as the data shows, if kids don't get a better start in life, they frequently don't graduate, they frequently end up in our justice system, and I would much rather be investing on the front end to give kids a better chance in life than pouring more money into our incarceration, our jail system, our criminal justice system. So for me, it's that thinking about transforming where you're investing public dollars. But it does come out to, it's about $10 a month. And I think for a lot of people, and that's for the average value home, for a lot of people, that is something. I'm not saying it's nothing,
Sure.
but for most people, $10 a month is something they could manage.
Okay, yeah, I just want to know how to
Yeah,
handle these
no, it's a good
people.
question. Thank you.
I was going to also add there was a study by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation that showed that the state of Texas loses $9.7 billion due to breakdowns and lack of affordable quality childcare for children under age 6. And so when we looked at that and tried to get the Travis County number, it was about $300 million because people aren't working full shifts, they're not returning to work after they have a baby, they can't find childcare, or their childcare is not reliable, and so they're not as productive in the workforce, they're not returning to work, and they're not working to their full capacity because of this. So it's costing our businesses. We just tend to not calculate that.
Yeah, that's $300 million just in Travis County.
So given the enormous payback, what is it, $13 saved for every dollar invested? How do you counter the argument that you invest the dollar now and then the people move away so that some other county gets the benefit?
We're trying to make Austin more affordable for families to stay here instead of leaving in the long run.
Hi. So it sounds like this proposition is, very business oriented, and it's considering wanting parents to, work more, and then.
Can you speak up a little? It's very hard to hear you. Just hold it really close to your mouth and speak louder.
Sorry. Okay. So it sounds like this proposal is very business-oriented based on everything that you said. I'm just curious, during this time that you were, doing all this prep work and research about it and how much it will cost and all that, did at any time there was any consideration for maybe, kind of a parental leave, kind of county-funded parental leave for parents, especially, we know that first 3 months is very important for both parents and children and their development, especially citing the, the developmental aspects of it. Was it even considered, come up at all?
Yeah, actually, that was one of the first things that we did, I think 2 or 3 years ago now. The county passed a parental leave policy that pays for people and keeps their job after they've had a child through birth or through adoption or other considerations. So the county employees, and I think the city of Austin as well, and I know a number of employers, although I don't know the exact numbers on that, have adopted these kinds of policies, recognizing that very thing, that parents need to be and should be with their children when they're first born. And so we have that policy on the books, and many of our employees are making use of it. And it is part of what attracts people to come work for Travis County. So we're getting a higher caliber of job seekers when we have job openings, because we have family-friendly policies that recognize the needs of families. So it's beneficial to us and to the population as well. I don't know if there's any.
I would say that family leave has been part of our Early Childhood Coalition advocacy effort along the way, and that if there was more robust family leave, we wouldn't need that highly, highly expensive infant care, especially in that 6-week to 3-month-year-old. And so, many programs just won't take them because they don't feel comfortable having 4 of those infants with 1 adult.
I was wondering about the staffing that's going to be required to administer this program, and also I was pleased to hear about the self-evaluation, but is there some provision for outside auditing within the county?
Yeah, so A few things. The county will be... No? No? Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Talk like you're yelling at your kids.
All right, I'm going to talk like I'm yelling at my kids. Thanks. So, several things. One is there is the third-party evaluation that's required. Also, the county auditor is a separate entity that will audit all of these investments as well. And then the way the county will implement it, they're committed to staffing up sufficiently in their Health and Human Services, Planning and Budget Department, but they will not implement these programs. They will procure out community organizations who are already doing this kind of work and provide the contract to provide the funding with those organizations to do that work. So it is not intended for the county to take on a whole new Department of Childcare.
And the county auditor is a separately selected official. We don't govern the county auditor. So really, they do have a very large measure of independence. And if they think we're doing something wrong, they let us know. So it's not like we control the county auditor.
Well, would you help me thank Commissioner Shea and Cathy McHorse for giving us insights before we go vote? I know some of you have probably voted already, but I hope maybe you waited until you could hear. So why don't we have like 5 minutes of meet and greet while we're changing panels, and that way, if you have individual questions, you could certainly do that. Thank you. Well, wonderful first panel. Now we have a second panel. Second panel is school finance, and Austin Independent School District and Manor Independent School District. Do you all know what a golden penny is? Do you know what a copper penny is? I am clueless, utterly clueless. Where's the handheld mic?
I thought y'all were doing it.
So the second panel, we have 3 panelists on the panel. The first, if I'm using this, yeah, I will get it back.
Is this better?
Okay, so the second panel, we have 3 panelists. Chandra Villanueva, who many of you have met before, because she was on the last panel that we had a couple months ago. Chandra oversees Every Texan's policy and advocacy work. She joined Every Texan in 2010, focuses on school finance and education policy, ranging from early education to higher education access and success. Arati is the founder of Raise Achievement, LLC. She serves as the external evaluator for National Science Foundation, NASA, and the U.S. Department of Education grants that create a diverse, highly qualified, and forward-thinking STEM workforce. Arati has been a member of the AISD board since 2018. In 2020, she was unanimously appointed board president by her colleagues. The board's responsible for hiring the superintendent, passing a $2 billion budget, representing the values of the community, ensuring the success of a record-breaking $2.4 billion bond, and adopting policies and ensure the safety, well-being, and success of 70,000 students and 12,000 staff members. Monique Celedon was born and raised in Austin. She became a licensed realtor in 1994. She moved with her family to Manor in 1997. She's the owner of Celedon Properties Group, co-founder of Joy to Be Free, Destination Ministries, and the Manor, Texas Disaster Relief Group. She was elected to the Manor ISD School Board in 2016, currently serves as its president. She's an active leader in her community, an ordained minister, and a life coach. Please help me welcome our three panelists to talk about taxes.
All right, thank you everybody for coming out this afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. So I'm going to give us a brief presentation on how our school finance system works and lay some context about what's happening with those voter approval tax rate elections that we're going to see on the ballot. I apologize in advance. This is going to get very, very complicated really quickly because I only have about 15 minutes. So we're going to dive deep in. So our school finance system, in the most simplest terms, it all starts with what we call a basic allotment, which is a per student amount of funding. Right now, that's $6,160. You take that basic allotment and you make adjustments for your student population and your district characteristics. Once you do all of these complex calculations, you get an entitlement. And you can think of that entitlement as like a cup or a bucket. And so the first thing we do is we tax our local property base to see if we can fill that entitlement. If we can't fill our bucket, the state puts in additional funding. If our bucket overflows, that's what we call recapture or Robin Hood. So that's the most simplest way to look at our school finance system, but of course it's much more complex than that. And one thing to keep in mind as we're going through this presentation today is that basic allotment, the building block of absolutely everything for our schools, is 100% arbitrary. It's based on nothing. There is no thought, no data, no plan, nothing. So we're talking about a very arbitrarily funded system. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're talking about how this system works. So I hope you guys can see these slides okay, but as I said, school funding is a combination of local and state tax dollars. Local dollars go in first, and then the state fills in the rest. Because Texas is a growing and popular state, school districts across the state have been able to fill their buckets quicker and quicker on their own. And so you can see that looking at the blue line for these last several years. And then there were some really big tax cuts that happened these last couple years, and I'll get to that in a second. But what we were seeing is we were putting in more and more of our local dollars, and the state was putting in less and less money each year. And this created mistrust with both our schools and our tax system. Taxpayers were like, hey, how is my tax bill going up every single year, but my schools are overcrowded and my teacher is underpaid? Obviously, our schools are being inefficient with the dollars. Obviously, property taxes are bad. But what people didn't realize was the state was putting in less and less money instead of making investments in education to grow the state's share. So around 2018, 2019, advocates started pushing the state to make a 50-50 contribution. They were like, the state should put in their fair share. We should all split this more equally. Well, I told advocates at the time that there is a lot of different ways to get to a 50-50 state share that don't include putting more money into our schools. That is what our legislature chose. Instead of putting more money in, they cut tax rates so that we would collect less locally, so the state would have to put in more to fill those entitlements, but none of that benefited our schools. So when we look at school funding, we're spending less than we were in 2020. And I picked the year 2020 because that's the year after we passed a big school finance reform bill that included these large ongoing tax cuts. The big spike you see in 2021 is because of COVID funding. But when we adjust for inflation back to 2016 dollars, you can see that we're putting in less money projected for 2025 than we were after this amazing supposed school finance bill was passed in 2019, because the legislature is not keeping up their commitment to schools and instead is spending all of their money cutting property tax rates. So now we're going to get super deep into the woods. So before 2019's HB3 bill was passed, this is what the tax rate looked for schools. And what we're going to be talking about today is the M&O tax. That's what we call maintenance and operations. This is the tax that actually funds your schools. This is what pays for teachers and all the daily upkeep and all your programmatic expenses. What I'm not going to talk about much is INS, which is interest and sinking, and that's for bond indebtedness and bond payments. So before HB3, and still today, we have two tiers in our tax system. The first tier is supposed to pay for the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, and the second tier is supposed to pay for enrichment. But in reality, most districts are taxing into this voluntary enrichment tier just to make ends meet. So back to that first tier, it used to be that everybody taxed at $1 per $100 of property value. And don't get too confused when we talk about dollars and pennies. In Texas, we just talk about tax rates weird. Because we tax per $100 of value, we talk about our tax rate in terms of pennies and sometimes dollars. Every other state, for the most part, taxes per $1,000 of property value and calls it a mill rate. So it's just weird terms that we use in Texas to make it more complicated. But before, everybody had to tax at a minimum of $1. And the idea was that all of our kids across the state are entitled to a high quality education. So all communities should have the same skin in the game. And we measured that by tax effort. We all taxed by $1 to see if we could fill that cup or not. If we couldn't fill the cup, we got the state aid. If our cup overflowed, we paid recapture. And then there was these additional tier that's broken up into two tiers called golden and copper pennies. And I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail later, but those are where these tax rate elections that we're having right now in both Austin and Manor are happening in our golden and copper penny area because those are optional. But in 2019, the legislature kind of blew up the Tier 1 funding and started doing all of these tax compression things that are really a scheme to kind of weed us off this M&O property tax rate so that they can make huge cuts to school in the future and push for privatization in the form of vouchers. So this is just sort of a visual of sort of what the school finance system looked like in terms of funding for different districts. And this is before HB3. So we have a property poor district and a property wealthy district. And these are actually based on Edgewood and Alamo Heights in San Antonio because they started most of the school finance lawsuits that have really driven our school finance policy across the state. So they were both taxing at $1, and to simplify the math, I'm just pretending they get the basic allotment, where in reality there's adjustments made for students and things like that, so they get different levels of funding based on their district makeups. But to keep the math simple, we're just going to pretend they're both getting the basic allotment only. And so our poor district is able to only generate about $2,400 per student from their own tax base. So the state has to fill them up. They give them about $3,700 to make sure that they get to that $6,160. The wealthy district has no problem filling that entitlement on their own, and then was paying almost $9,000 per student in recapture. So the wealthy districts look at that and they say, hey, that's not fair. All of the things I could do with all that money if I didn't have to send it back to the state. What they're not thinking about is the district down the street that's getting state aid. They're both getting the same level of money. All recapture does is even things out between school districts. And so the rich districts, the property wealthy districts, have complained and complained and complained about recapture. So the legislature was like, we know how to fix this. Collect less money. Collect less money locally, it'll make your recapture payment go down, but it's not going to help your schools. So they started compressing tax rates. And they did it in two ways. There's statewide compression and then there's local compression. Basically, if you see above 2.5% growth across the state, everybody's tax rate goes down. If your tax value growth for your individual district is above the statewide average, you compress a little further. You can only have a 10% gap between the highest and lowest taxing districts. Some of this stuff is really, really weedy. But anyways, the M&O tax has been declining over the years. And then this last session, they spent almost $18 billion compressing tax rates further, which could have spent another $1,000 per student. So our legislature is really prioritizing tax cuts over spending on our kids. So then when we look at these two districts, now they're taxing at very different tax rates. They're both taxing at lower rates, but different rates. So the property poor district can generate even less funding because they have a lower tax rate. The state has to put in more. The property wealthy district still fills their entitlement, no problem. Their recapture payment went down significantly, but who cares? That didn't go to the classrooms. That's not money to pay teachers. Schools were complaining about recapture because they wanted more money for their kids. The way to really address recapture and put more money into our schools is to increase the basic allotment. That's the tide that rises all ships, and that's what the legislature refuses to do. So if we adjusted it even for inflation, we would be at $7,500 going into 2025 if the legislature actually put that money into increasing the basic allotment. Instead, they're prioritizing tax cuts over our kids every single day. And again, this is an arbitrary number. So while inflation would be great, what we really need is a cost study to figure out how much it actually costs to pay a living wage and meet the needs of our students, and then adjust it for inflation. But even just adjusting it for inflation would be a lot better than what we're getting right now. So now let's get into those golden and copper pennies, the really, really complicated part that I often don't actually talk about because it gets to be really complicated. So for our purposes today, we don't really need to know too much about prior law. A couple things have changed. Golden pennies used to be worth the value of Austin ISD's yield. The state basically guarantees a higher yield for those pennies. It used to be whatever Austin generated. Now it's set at 160% of that basic allotment, or the 96th percentile of wealth. And those pennies are not subject to recapture. So if you can generate money locally that's greater than what the state guarantees, you get to keep it. But the state does guarantee a higher yield. The copper pennies, on the other hand, there used to be 11, now there's only 8 because they've increased the number of golden, but they wanted to keep in that 17 cents of enrichment. And they did increase the value on those copper pennies slightly. It's set at 80% of the basic allotment. So if the basic allotment goes up, the value of those copper pennies goes up as well. But they are subject to recapture. So for a long time, wealthy districts didn't go into the copper penny realm at all because they didn't get as much money from them and they had to pay a bunch back. But because our school funding has been so stagnant and underfunded for so long, districts like Austin ISD now need those copper pennies just to make ends meet. So let's look at Prop A in terms of tax rates. So as you can see, Prop A is going to increase the tax rate by almost 10 cents, well, just a little more than 9 cents. And if you look at 22's tax year, we are paying about 80-something cents for that M&O Tier 1. It used to be $1. We had almost all of our golden pennies. We were at 7.9 when you could go up to a full 8 on those golden pennies. So this tax rate election will get that last little sliver of a golden penny. And I only threw INS in here because the literature I saw from TEA or from Austin ISD included INS, but I don't think INS is relevant to this, but I also know people's tax bill sees the entire school tax. So I just threw that on there so that the numbers would be consistent with anything you see from Austin ISD. And so going into this next tax year, the tax rate was compressed significantly because of all of the $18 billion-ish that the legislature spent on cutting tax rates. So our tax rate dropped really far. And then that's the golden penny rate, the INS rate. So it would be 85.95 if we don't pass Prop A. But if you pass Prop A, we're going to get all 17 of those pennies. So you will be paying a lot of recapture. Well, we're going to raise 171 million, but we only get to keep 41. But at the end of the day, our tax rate is still lower than it was the year before because of compression. And compression happens every single year. So people don't need to be worried about, what happens with their tax rates for the schools because the state's trying to get rid of that tax rate. What we need to be worried about is the future of public school finance in the future going forward because they're trying to completely destabilize the system. But for our individual district, this isn't an issue at all. As the kids say, it's hot to go. Vote yes on Prop A, I'm all for it. And so a lot of people, though, are concerned about recapture. I hear these rumors all the time that recapture doesn't go to schools. There is 5 ways to do recapture. Almost every single school district just picks the easiest and cheapest option, which is send money to the state. That's what Austin does, that's what everyone does. That money must go into the school fund. Every recapture dollar goes to education. But what people don't understand is most of it goes to charters. So charter schools are 100% state funded, and they were invented or introduced in Texas anyways after recapture. So when we created the recapture system, that's why I got that Robin Hood name, take from the wealthy, give to the poor. Well, we didn't have charters that are neither. They're 100% state funded. So what we saw for a really long time was the amount spent on charters and the amount collected in recapture was about the same. They trended together. And the reason that is because when you lose a student to a charter school, your property values stay the same, but it's spread out between fewer kids. So your wealth per student increases and you look wealthier than you were before. In actuality, when Houston went into recapture, if all of their kids that were in charter schools were at Houston ISD, they would have gotten twice as much money from the state as they paid in recapture. So a lot of these recapture dollars that we'll see being paid with Prop A are going to go to kids here in Austin in charter schools. That money is staying in our community, that money is staying in education. The real issue is the basic allotment. Prop A is a good idea. Our school needs it because our state's not doing their job. And that's it on my presentation. Fund our schools, reject vouchers. That's about all I got.
Is this working? Okay, thank you. Testing. Okay. Thank you for that hearty endorsement and excellent overview. I think I took some notes too. All right, can you guys hear me okay? All right, great. Thank you. So I'm Arati Singh. I am the school board president for Austin ISD. Love serving in this role. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for doing everything you can to preserve democracy and for educating our community on these important down ballot issues. So behind me in a moment, you will see this cycling through little profiles of some of our recent graduates, because this is a reminder that even though we're talking about numbers and all of this stuff, we're talking about changing kids' lives and investing in our students so that they have a chance to contribute to our community, to work, support families, and maybe even become members of the League of Women Voters. Who knows? So, here in AISD, we have students that are we're a public school district. So we have students that will graduate here and they will go to UT, or they could go to Harvard or ACC or get an industry certification and work. I'm sorry, did you want me to scooch? Okay. And the thing is, we're just, some people might take multiple paths to do all of this, and that's great because we're here to serve every single child that comes through our doors. We cannot be selective and say, sorry, you have special needs, you're going to go away, or sorry, you have a disciplinary history, we can't take you. We're going to bring them in and we're going to welcome them. The other thing I want to mention is AISD is really rocking it. I mean, that's why I'm serving in this role, is I really truly believe in our district. We have students, we're at a time right now where school districts are actually cutting teacher certification requirements, if you can believe that. They are removing them. So anybody with a college degree could come in and teach and not even go through an alternative certification program. AISD, on the other hand, is we realize that this is like our core competency is teaching students, and we actually have more nationally board certified teachers than any other school district in the state by far. That is the gold standard. It's like getting a master's degree plus in education. In addition to that, we have students that are in middle school who are getting college credit for Spanish in middle school, and that's because we invest heavily in our dual language programs, and we believe that if a student is speaking a different language at home than English, we view that as a strength and not as a liability. All right, our kids are taking music, they're taking art, they have nurses, they have certified librarians. These are things that the state considers optional. if you can believe that. But we view that as a critical part of our core mission. So as Chandra made an excellent case that we've been stretching our dollars as far as they can go. We can't do that anymore. We're really at a point now where we have got to go to our voters and ask you all to help invest in the state because the state is not increasing the basic allotment. Okay, recapture is not the boogeyman, and Chandra wrote a really good article on this a couple of years ago that made the rounds, because when I first started on the board 5 years ago, we were all saying recapture is the boogeyman. It's not recapture. I actually used to teach in an underserved school district in South Texas, in Donna, Texas. They're a beneficiary of recapture. We needed it. The problem is the basic allotment. As she said, it is an arbitrary number. It's not anywhere near enough to pay for educating our students the way we want to. So the other thing that you might want to know is about 70% of school districts in Central Texas alone are passing deficit budgets. That is not normal. That is not the sign of a healthy public education funding system. All right, so our board voted to pass Prop A back in August. Our administration brought this to us. You know, they brought the budget to us, and they were like, look, if we want to do the things we want to do, it's going to cost money. Prop A will bring in $41 million new dollars to AISD. Okay, that money is going to go through to some things that are absolutely critical. The first thing it's going to go to is compensation, because we know that without being able to recruit and retain really great people, our kids are going to suffer. Okay, again, we have a high standard of quality for our teachers, and our kids deserve that. So that's one thing. It's going to help increase it's going to increase the pay for every single hourly worker as well, because we view our bus drivers, our custodians, our TAs, all of those guys as educators as well. Our bus drivers are the first people to greet most of our students every single morning, and it's important that they are also highly qualified and are committed to staying in our districts. Okay, the other thing that it's going to go towards is providing really critical mental health and academic supports for our schools. One of the things that I'm really excited about is we're going to be using some of this to hire more content specialists, and these are people who work specifically with students who have been identified to have learning disabilities and really ensure that they are getting the services that they are legally entitled to. And sidebar on special education, I would love for you to write a paper on this, Chandra, but the underfunding of IDEA, which is the federal special education funding, we only get about 14% of what we are entitled to. So AISD we spend about 3 times more on special education than we actually receive funding for. And that is not unique. So let that sit for a minute. And finally, Prop A will help ensure that we remain financially stable. Every school district in the state goes through quite a rigorous fiscal responsibility audit every single year by the state. And our board is 100% committed to getting the highest category rating for that. That is so important to us. Not all districts do that, but we do, and we have achieved that. And we also have a AAA bond rating as well. And these are things that I personally am not willing to budge on. We have been, there are folks who are like, hey, maybe you need to lower your savings or, do other things. And I don't want to do that. That is irresponsible, speaking for myself, not on behalf of the board here, but I really want to make sure that we remain a fiscally strong organization. I do want to talk about my role as a parent in the district as well. I have one daughter who's 24, graduated from Austin High. Any Austin High grads here by chance? Oh, come on. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, that's all right. We have some AISD graduates in here or former teachers. Okay. Grandparents, parents. Okay, good. So we, after COVID, during COVID, our district lost about 1/3 of our teachers. They quit teaching for whatever reason in our district. Some of them left the profession altogether.
It was a really hard time for our district. And my kiddo, she had long-term substitutes in some of her classes, her core classes like math. Her big passion is debate. This is my younger one. She and her friends decided to become the debate teachers, you know, and kind of, it did not go well. No one listened. But however, they finally have a debate teacher. We're fully staffed. We're actually more fully staffed now than we've been in years and years. Our teacher retention has actually increased 20% in the last 2 years. We used to have huge gaps in retention rates between our Title I, which are largely poverty-serving schools, versus non-Title I, but that is virtually the same now. Our retention rates for teachers, and that is huge, y'all. That's like a really huge indicator of equity from my perspective, and something that the district had not tracked, that's a very recent thing that they've started tracking. So anyway, we've reduced attrition, our enrollment is stabilizing, our kids are rocking it. The problem is the state. We need money. I don't know how else to say it. Yes, some of that money is paid back in recapture. I do want to give you a little something that might make it go down a little easier, and Chandra kind of mentioned this in her presentation as well, but we used to pay about 51% of our property taxes that we collected back to the state in recapture before HB3. We're now at 49%, okay? If Prop A passes, we'll go back up to 51%. So we have been in this space before, and my hope is that the state will do something this legislative session, and we continue to stay strong against vouchers and other things that the state is trying to do to privatize and really weaken public education, creating, vouchers. A lot of these charter schools, they're creating a redundant system, oftentimes not effective. Right next to AIS, right next to an AISD school or a traditional public school. So now you've got two schools that are half empty, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. Someone help me figure that out. I don't know. But I will just end by saying, we're trying to educate kids, and the state is so, not only are they messing with funding, but we haven't even gotten, they're in such shambles, is really the best word I can think of, that we haven't even gotten our accountability ratings in 2 years. Okay? Again, someone explain that to me. I don't get it. Our kids deserve so much better. And we are really excited to have the support of such a broad group of people. We've got the Chamber of Commerce. We have a press conference there tomorrow. We also have the Teachers Union. So when you can get the Chamber of Commerce and the Teachers Union to agree on something, that's good. Many of our PTAs are supporting this. Both of the members of Congress that represent AISD and a lot of other electeds are supporting this. I know Brigid Shea is and others. So we appreciate it. Now we just got to make sure everybody knows about it and actually goes down the ballot and votes for it. So that's it for me. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you. Yes. No, I'll do questions later, I think, is what I'm being told.
So we have one more speaker, and this is Manor ISD that is under the same condition, I guess I would say, that Austin Independent School District is. So they are trying to address their school funding issues. And so now I will turn the mic over to Monique Celedon, who will talk about Manor ISD as well.
These two women have pretty much wrapped everything up, so I'm going to jump to something a little different. We've got to get the vote out. We've got to get out there and be on the state's butt about giving public education the finances that we need to serve our children. What are they doing? Every legislative session, they are out there just banging around, not doing anything at all to help our kids. And that's what is most important, is that we as women need to get out there, as men in our area, get out there so that we can get the justice that our kids deserve. That's what we need to do. Manor is about 10 minutes from downtown Austin. And I've been there for about 25 years. We just broke ground on an HEB, praise God. But Austin is starting to kind of run into Manor ISD now. We serve about 10,000 children, not anywhere close to AISD, but we are all struggling out there. All of our schools in the state of Texas are struggling right now. COVID did not help. COVID did not help, but neither did the state. And we've got to get out there and get the word out. The lack of voters is because of the lack of education. And it is our responsibility to educate our voters on what they're voting for. So I applaud you for doing this, for sure. But even when I was sitting with Chandra earlier, there was a little bit of stuff that I wasn't understanding myself. And that's what's missing, is a lack of education. I'm the school board president of Manor ISD, and I don't even understand exactly what's going on. My board members contact me and go, what's going on? Why are we having to go out for a loan just to get us through the early part of January? Why are we struggling? And if I can't explain it, our superintendent can't really explain it, we need people like Chandra to come out and educate not only the community, but also the politicians that are out there representing us. So anyway, Manor, sorry about that. I'm just very passionate about getting out the vote. So that's one thing for sure. I work with a lot of younger generation because I sell houses, so there's a lot of first-time home buyers that come to me, and most of them either aren't registered to vote or don't know what they're voting for. And again, it's our responsibility to get that out and get the information that they need. But again, Manor is just a few miles from Austin, and we are struggling. We have a lot of great things. We are out there. We have the highest rate for early college graduating with their associate's degree in the state of Texas. And who doesn't want to support those kids? They're working their asses off, and excuse my language, but they're working their asses off for the state to not step up and do their part. We have charter schools coming out to our area left and right, and yet we're losing kids. We just built a brand new elementary school that for millions of dollars. It's sitting empty because we couldn't open it because we didn't have the funds to do it. So sit with that. It is our responsibility to inform our younger generation to get registered, get out there and vote, and do what is right for the state of Texas. I am tired of what the state of Texas has been serving us for the last several years. What's it going to take? What's it going to take? Thank you.
Thank you. So now we'll open it up for questions and hopefully some answers to those questions.
Hello. My question is about the basic allotment. So I understand that it's an arbitrary amount. But I'm assuming that in other public schools in other parts of the country, they also operate perhaps on a basic allotment. So if you were rating the basic allotment per student in Texas across the different states in the United States, where would we fall?
Yeah, that's a good question. Almost every state has a similar school finance system to ours that we call a foundational funding system, where you start with a basic allotment. Everybody makes different adjustments, but overall, our overall per spending for students is around, I think we rank 46. So we're way at the bottom in our per student spending, and a lot of that is because our basic allotment is too low. And other states have gone through cost studies to figure out what that basic allotment should be. The last time we did that with any real effort was in 1984 when Ross Perot led a commission to study school finance and created the school finance system we have today. And when that commission presented their evidence to the legislature, they funded it at about 76% of what was recommended at the time. So we've been shortchanging our schools since our school finance system was created. And that's the same thing for all of those, what we call weights, additional funding for special populations, like our funding for low-income kids, English language learners. The Perot Commission had all of this data and all of this support on what these funding elements should be, and the legislature funded them at half or less of what was recommended. And they did the cost study at the time by creating what they called quality ISD. What school would you send your kids or grandkids to if you didn't know what the tax base was? And they talked to superintendents, they talked to practitioners to figure out how much it costs to educate a kid. I tried to recreate that study in 2018, and I tried to get legislative buy-in. I was working with a group of philanthropists, and we were talking to legislators, and we talked to Dan Huberty's office, who at the time was the chair of the Public Education Committee, and pitched our idea of doing a new study, recreating the Perot Commission, and his response was, why would the legislature participate in anything that can be used against us in court? Because they know that if they answer that question of how much it costs, it's going to be used against them in the next school finance lawsuit. So the legislature is intentionally burying their head in the sand, and that's why we're at the bottom in per student spending across the country. Yeah.
So a question for Arati. You talked about one of the benefits here of raising the salaries of teachers and raising the salaries of hourly employees. Can you talk about how significant those raises will be in either dollars or percentage?
Yeah, good question. So she was asking about the actual amount of the raises for teachers. So it's going to range. I will say that, and we're not arbitrary about the numbers we come up with. There's actually, unlike the state, but we got a study commissioned by the Texas Association of School Boards to actually study our salaries and do a market analysis. And the category of teachers that were the most underpaid relative to our peers were our experienced teachers. So once they hit, so we're pretty good when it comes to brand new teachers and hiring. We're on par with our peers, but it's around 5 to 8 years of experience where it drops off. And so we're going to really focus our efforts on that group. And for the exact amount, it really varies for each year. I don't have an exact number, but it could range from, I should probably get an exact number for you. I'll check my FAQ file to see if I have that number. I recall someone saying something about 700 something a year on average, but it could be more, it could be less. I don't want to give the wrong number. I think for some it could be fairly substantial, like way more than that amount that I just said, but I'll have to get back to you with an exact number. Yeah, I do want to mention one thing I forgot to say is if you have the over age 65 exemption, you will not have to, you won't see a change based on AISD Prop A. So that might be relevant.
Hi, I'm going to be incorrect because Governor Abbott ties increases in school finance to the passage of the voucher bill. And that is why there's been no change since 2019. We each have to write him a letter to decouple those two and give them the reasons they're talking about. Because it is criminal not to fund schools.
Yeah, and that is absolutely right. There's actually $4 billion sitting in the budget right now that's been appropriated but not allocated to our schools because Greg Abbott threw a temper tantrum when he didn't get his vouchers.
Question over here? Yeah, sorry.
Oh, just
We'll
one
take
more
one more
thing.
question.
Okay, one more thing about the basic allotment. So what is the basic allotment in states that fund education, public education, as it should be?
Yeah, it's not as easy of a question to answer because some people put a lot in the base or they put a lot in the weights. Like, for example, our English language learner weight is only 10% for most of those students, 20% if are an additional 5%, I think, if they're in a 1 or 2-way dual language. But in Maryland, it's 90%. So you'd have to look at every state individually and see where they put more of their effort. Is it into the base level funding or is it into the weights? But because every system is slightly different in how they fund it and the different things that they fund, it's hard to do in like an apples to apples comparison and say this is where each basic allotment ranks, because all of the weights are so much different, and that is different because it's hard to say like, oh, if you have a weight of 90%, you're obviously doing better than 10%, but if their basic allotment was like 2,000 and ours was 6,000, then maybe our weight's better. Ours isn't. It isn't. But it's hard to do those kind of apples to apples comparison because every state's finance system is so different and very complex. But that's why we look at the per student funding levels, and ours are very, very low across the board. Well, we rank about 46 in the nation. Oh, thousands.
I've been hearing that 10,000 is the average, and we're at 6160. So.
Yeah, no, the average is definitely a lot higher than that. It's like probably like 18,000, because it also depends on the
entitlements.
Well, and it also depends, on like the universe that you're counting when you look at that, because we have 3 ways of counting students. Like when TEA says comes up with these like astronomical, because sometimes they're like, we spend $15,000 per student. They get that by counting every single dollar that the state spends in Article 3, the part of the education budget, which also includes the administration of TEA and all of the service centers and everything like that. So TEA likes to report these way overinflated numbers of per student spending, but in reality ours is closer to probably 10,000 once you include all of the weights and facilities and all of the other kind of outside the formula issues, but the average nationwide is closer to probably 17,000, 18,000.
If I may, there's one more piece I want to add that not a lot of people are talking about yet, but this group here needs to know this. There's something that was passed last session called HB 1605, and one of the things that's doing, it's worse than just funding, y'all. That bill authorized the state to create a very, I would call it a Christian nationalist, Bible-infused curriculum that has been developed. Your tax dollars have been used to develop this. It's being considered by the State Board of Education as we speak, and school districts will be incentivized to adopt this curriculum and get $60 per student funding if they adopt this curriculum. So I want you to know this is not just about underfunding schools. This is to push an agenda that is very different from probably what the Constitution would allow.
So before we get into other topics, because I really don't want to do that, really school funding. So 2 things. One is Jessica, our president, would like to say a few words, but I hope that you will all help me thank our panelists today. I think we learned an awfully lot. And I'll turn the mic over.
Thank you, Joanne. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jessica Foreman. I'm the president of the Austin Area League. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, panelists, for sharing all that great info. You said it best with what I'm about to tell you. So last Monday was the voter registration deadline, and how many of you were out sometime this season registering voters? Raise your hand. Thank you. I just did some data reporting that I sent to the U.S. League in our league, and this is separate from Williamson County, okay, who is also doing a lot of events for us. But just in the last 2, July, August, and September, not counting the first 7 days of October, it looks like we registered over 3,400 voters in Travis County, just us, okay. Incredible job. But now it's time to switch gears. So hopefully you all have your voter's guide, which has all of the local elections, including both of the ones we talked about today, the city council elections, ISD boards in different parts depending on where you live. And we want to transition into getting out the vote. And so what you're going to get from us, if you are a member or if you're on our emailing list, is some tips on how you can help get out the vote, including a web page we are creating that has all kinds of things, everything from content, if you have a Slack channel at work, appropriate nonpartisan get out the vote content, to information you can share with your neighbors, all kinds of things. So that is what we want to transition to, because guess what? Next Monday, early voting starts. How many of you are signed up to be poll workers? I know we have a lot of folks. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. That's a big, big job. So sometimes when voting starts, it gets a little quiet around here because I know many of you are out actually working the polls. So what we want you to do is to get a voter's guide, to give your friend a voter's guide. We have some extras if you would like to share with folks. And of course, you can always find it online at vote411.org. And you can also find it stuffed in the Austin Chronicle for this week, wherever you can find them. I was talking to Ann. Unfortunately, the Austin Chronicle issue this year is about death on the front. Whoops, they didn't mention that. No, I'm just kidding. But life is in the middle with our voter's guide stuffed in there. So we're going to wrap it up here. I'll give it back to, do you have any final things? We definitely want you to take some cake. We do not need all that cake left here. So take an extra 15 minutes. Chat with everyone, buy your Vote 411 sign if you want to stick it in your front yard, and transition these next few weeks to help us get out the vote, just like everyone. And join me one more time in thanking our panelists. All right, so get some cake and we will see you soon.